Hi, I'm Charles, and this is aimed at grassroots youth football coaches, especially those of you who are working with players from ages 6 to 12. Over the next few minutes, I want to talk about two things that go hand in hand: your coaching behavior and empowering coaching. Both are backed by real research, and both can genuinely change how your players experience the game. So here's a question to start with. If you filmed your next session and watched it back, would you actually know exactly what you say and do? Would you know what you do session after session, often without even thinking about it? See, most coaches probably couldn't answer that with complete confidence, and that's completely normal. Research actually shows that what coaches think they do during a session and what they actually do can often be quite different. This resource covers two areas. First, how to start noticing your own coaching behavior. And second, how to create the kind of environment that helps young players enjoy the game, keep coming back week after week, and continue improving. Both parts are based on proper research, but I'm going to keep this practical rather than making it feel too academic. So just to quickly check that this is relevant for you, you're probably a volunteer. Around 70% of coaches in the UK are. You're giving up your own time to coach. You're also probably working with players somewhere between the ages of 6 and 12. This is often called the foundation phase, where enjoyment and keeping players involved can matter simply more than just winning. And you probably want something practical, not a long and dense journal article that you never really get round to reading. If that sounds like you, then this is built for you. Let's start with part one, coach behavior. What are you actually doing out there, and does that match with what you think you are doing? In simple terms, coach behavior is just the things you actually say and do during a session and the way that you do them. That includes instruction, where you tell players what to do; demonstration, where you show them how; feedback, whether that's positive, corrective, or negative; questioning, including whether you're asking open or closed questions; praise and encouragement; and even silence, sometimes just giving players space to think things through for themselves. So the way that you use these things and the balance between them can generally affect whether a player enjoys your sessions, how much that they learn, and whether they stay involved in the game long term. So here's the uncomfortable bit. What coaches think they do and what they actually do can often be two different things, as mentioned. One study looking at professional youth football coaches found three things that are worth knowing. First, poor self-awareness. Coaches often couldn't accurately describe their own behavior or explain why they did certain things. Second, coaches working with younger age groups tended to be much more instruction heavy. They use significantly more drills and more direct instruction. And third, personal experience and the way coaches were coached when they were younger seemed to shape their behavior far more than formal education or research. This can lead to emotional coaching. And when you think about football, that actually makes a lot of sense. A lot of coaches have spent years playing the game before moving into coaching themselves. So naturally, the coaches and managers that they worked under can have a big influence on how they see the game and how they deal with players. Think about your own experience as well. There are probably coaches you had when you were younger who you still remember now. Maybe you remember something they said to you, maybe it was the way they treated other players, or maybe it was just the type of environment that they created. Sometimes you might find yourself copying those things without even realizing it. And other times you might do the complete opposite because of a negative experience you once had yourself. So the point isn't that your past experience is necessarily good or bad. It's just worth taking a step back and thinking about where your own coaching habits actually come from. Because if we're not aware of that, we can easily end up repeating the same behaviors simply because that's how we were coached ourselves. But none of this means that none of this is meant to make you feel bad. It's generally just how many coaches operate without even realizing it. So for the next slide, there are a few common patterns that are worth watching for in your own coaching. So younger age groups tend to get more repetitive drills. Older groups tend to get more game-based practice where there is more decision making. It's also naturally easier to just tell a player what to do than to ask them a question that helps them figure it out themselves. Because of that, most coaches tend to default to telling rather than asking. Coaches without formal coaching education also tend to rely on more negative or corrective feedback, as well as more direct instruction. Again, none of this means you're a bad coach. It just means it's worth taking a proper look at what you actually do during your sessions. So what does the evidence say works better? That's where empowering coaching comes in. So empowering coaching, this is part 2. So what does the evidence actually say helps young players thrive? So empowering coaching in simple terms means creating an environment where players feel more confident, more in control, and more able to make their own decisions, rather than just feeling like they're there to follow orders. Here's something you could actually try aloud in training. Imagine saying this: you got 1 minute to score more goals than anyone else. 3, 2, 1, go. That creates an ego climate. It's all about comparison and beating other people. Now imagine saying this: you got 1 minute to score more goals than you did last week. 3, 2, 1, go. It's the same drill, the same players, but it sends a completely different message. That creates a task climate where the focus is on a player's own progress. That contrast is really the main idea behind something called achievement goal theory. And the research is pretty clear that task-focused language is more beneficial than ego-focused language. So why task climate wins? One major review of research into motivational climate looked at more than 34,000 participants. The findings held up regardless of a player's own personal disposition. In other words, it didn't really matter whether they were naturally competitive or not. That's why it matters so much. Players in a task-focused environment tend to be more relaxed under pressure, better motivated in the long term, and more resilient when they face setbacks. They're also more focused on their own progress instead of constantly comparing themselves with other people. Players in an ego-focused environment, on the other hand, tend to be more anxious about failure. They can be harder on themselves after losing. They're more likely to give up when things aren't going well. They can be more likely to cut corners or even cheat in order to win. This unfortunately can lead to gamesmanship as well, which we see now quite often. And that's quite a big difference when you think about it. And it can come from something as simple as the language you use during a drill. So the 3 needs. There's also a related idea called self-determination theory. This basically says that motivation grows when 3 basic needs are met. So that could be in training, in matches, or really anywhere. The first is autonomy. That means having a voice, having some choice, and having some input into what happens. The second is competence. That means feeling capable and being able to experience genuine success and progress. And the third is relatedness. That means feeling connected to your teammates and connected to you as their coach. And it's about enjoying being part of the group and having fun together, basically. When those 3 needs are met, players are genuinely more motivated to keep showing up, keep taking part, and keep improving. So what does this look like in practice? What does this actually look like from week to week? On the do more of this side, you could try giving players some choice during a drill or a session. You could explain the reason behind a rule or a decision, rather than just telling them exactly what to do. You could ask players how they're finding a session and actually listen to what they say. You could let them design or lead part of a drill, and you could focus your feedback on the action rather than the person. On the watch out for this side, be more careful about using rewards to control behavior rather than encourage it. Be careful about only praising the players who win or perform the best. Try not to pressure players with your own opinions or your own agenda. Avoid completely comparing players against each other. Don't openly compare players against each other. And avoid giving more attention or affection to someone only when they perform well. These aren't huge changes. They are small changes in the way you talk and interact with your players. But over time, these small changes, they can really add up. So, and this isn't just theory that applies at a grassroots level. Now, even one of the most successful national teams in world sport has built its culture around empowerment. The New Zealand All Blacks give their players genuine ownership over standards and decisions instead of simply telling them what to do. So leadership is therefore shared. Senior players actively help shape the culture and the environment around the team. You see this more and more in professional sports now with older players, more senior players leading. And the whole environment focuses on personal growth and responsibility rather than creating a fear of failure. The principles are really the same whether you're looking at whether you're coaching a World Cup winners or an under-9s team on a Saturday morning. Give players some ownership and they can respond to it. It's simple as that. So to bring everything together, here are 4 small things that you could try in your very, very next session. So first, notice one thing. Pick just one behavior, such as how often you give an instruction compared to how often you ask a question. Then just count it during your session this week. Second, swap one phrase. Change one piece of feedback from being focused on the outcome to being focused on progress. For example, say better than last week instead of better than the others. Okay. Third, hand over one decision. So you see this more and more now as well. Let your players choose one small part of their drill or even the warm-up themselves. And fourth, ask rather than just tell. Try replacing one instruction with a question and give the players the chance to work it out for themselves. You don't need to completely overhaul your coaching style tonight, of course. Just pick one of these things and try this week, you know. You don't need to change everything at once. Simply noticing your own behavior and then changing even one small thing to create a more empowering environment can make a real difference. It can change the way young players experience the game. And we've seen this, you know, it's not just young players, you know, it's older players as well, senior players, professional players. It could potentially affect whether they continue enjoying it and stay involved in the long term. Looking back at the All Blacks, you know, even looking at teams like Brighton now in the Premier League, you know, other higher professional teams, you know, they're giving more ownership to their players and they love leading with elder players as well. You know, that the more senior players, you've just seen Chelsea has just purchased two players over the age of 34 years old, trying to implement leadership into their team. That's how important these professional teams find it these days, you know. But I think just giving ownership, you know, to your players now is such an important thing as well. And what we spoke about, you know, giving tasks to them, you know, setting aside one task to them could just be the warm up. Doesn't just have to be the warm up. Could be a drill, you know, as well. And asking questions is so important instead of just telling. You know, you see that with more coaches nowadays. Thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been helpful, especially with I'm glad I could put in a professional example for you as well there. It's not only the All Blacks as well. You look at teams like Brighton, as I mentioned earlier. Yeah, with ownership, I think it's very, very crucial. But thank you very much for listening, and I wish you all the best.